off.
Is it on? And thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start this hearing in just a minute, and so I want to give everyone some time to get settled, and we'll be starting the hearing in just under a minute. So thank you very much. Okay, we are going to go ahead and open up this hearing. I want to thank, first of all of you for being here today. Certainly, most importantly, to our witnesses for being here. It's incredibly important for us to get your testimony into the congressional record, and for us as the Oversight Committee to hear directly from all of you, including obviously our additional panel that we'll be hearing in a little bit later in today's afternoon. So I want to thank all of you. Obviously, Congressman Subramanian, Congressman Walkinshaw, first, thank you for being incredible hosts and leaders on our Oversight Committee. This hearing is happening because of both of them. And particularly want to thank, of course, for Congressman Walkinshaw, this is your home turf, and was sharing that. I think the congressman, used to sit just right over there, right on the board, and it's great to be here. Of course, it's really important for us as a committee to get out and hear directly from not just, of course, federal workers, but across the country on the variety of issues that we are facing. We have members, of course, from our Virginia delegation and others that will be coming in throughout this hearing. And of course, everyone's going to get a chance to make some comments and ask some questions. I want to thank the chairman of the Fairfax Board of Supervisors, Jeff McKay, and his team. The team here has been amazing to work with, and our oversight team has been very grateful to that partnership. So let's give them a big round of applause, and thank you. I want to remind us why we're here. Over the past year, President Trump and Elon Musk have used DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, to wreck our government and try to attempt one of the largest transfers of wealth from the poor and working class people to the rich that we know of in American history. And on top of that, this administration has put in place what we believe is horrors that have impacted the average person, federal workers, in their ability to work, take care of their family, and the challenges that they face. Now, that damage is being felt all over the country, but especially in Northern Virginia, where so many people, of course, serve our government. And thank you for your service. You've seen the damage. There's been hundreds of thousands of dedicated federal workers that have had their jobs impacted or have been driven from their careers. Collective bargaining rights have been ripped away. Entire agencies have been eliminated. And they've attacked whistleblowers and oversight safeguards, leaving waste, fraud, and abuse and corruption go unchecked. And they have worked to turn our federal workforce into an army that serves the president, not the law and the Constitution. Now, of course, here are some headlines of the DOGE damage. A year later, we're seeing some of these impacts. Cuts that leave children, veterans, seniors, and others without the care they need, delayed help for domestic violence survivors, delayed help to kids experiencing homelessness, and delays in getting new medicine into the hands of sick patients. And of course, there are delays in agencies for just answering the phone and getting people help that they need. We have seen reckless handling of our Social Security data, potentially exposing millions of Americans to criminals and foreign adversaries. And of course, with what happened to USAID, they left millions of innocent people to die. Food and supplies paid for by U.S. tax dollars to save lives were left to rot in warehouses and ports around the world. And decades of partnerships, of goodwill that we've built across the globe were decimated. We know that DOGE failed, and we know that Trump has attacked the federal workforce. It actually also saved no money. Now, as you can see here, federal spending was actually higher in 2025. And while Donald Trump ripped away jobs, wrecked government services, and attacked programs, he handed billions of dollars in tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. DOGE was just a front for massive corruption and giveaways to the very rich. Now, our hearing today will document the harm done so we can look towards the future and most importantly, hear from some incredible witnesses. And I want to point out that today, our committee releases a comprehensive report documenting the abuses of DOGE. It's called Breaking Government: How DOGE and Trump Cost Taxpayers, Federal Workers, and Public Services. So it's a good report. I encourage folks to get a copy of it. I want to thank Representative Stansberry, who leads our DOGE committee for Democrats, who was involved also in that report. Now, this report shows that DOGE failed to eliminate waste, DOGE made government less efficient, and DOGE incompetence endangered Americans. Now, the American people deserve better, and everyone in this room deserves better as well. I want to thank our panelists again. I look forward to the discussion. And we're going to introduce a few folks in a minute, but I do want to yield to Representative Subramanian, who's going to give an opening statement. And before I do, and Suhas knows this, he was the first person to mention we got to get a hearing focused on federal workers. And I want to thank you for that work on this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Garcia, Representative Walkinshaw, for hosting us in your old stomping grounds. And I want to also mention a special thanks. Representative Walkinshaw and I stand on the shoulders of giants. I want to thank my predecessor, Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, as well as Congressman Walkinshaw's predecessor, Jerry Connolly. This is also his old stomping grounds. His wife, Smitty, is here today. If you want to raise your hand, let's give her a round of applause. And he would always say that protecting federal workers in our region was a bipartisan issue, and he always made it a bipartisan issue. And so it's unfortunate that we have to be here today to do this hearing to talk about what's happened and why we need to fix it. But we are here today because of what happened to the federal workforce and what's continuing to happen to the federal workforce, as well as our contractors as well over the past year. And the disaster has caused not just for our region, but for the entire country. And we're meeting here specifically because because this region has been hit, but we have people from all over the country who are here because their regions have been hit too, and every single person in this country has been hurt by the impact it has had on services. And since President Trump signed the executive order to create DOGE on January 20th, 2025, we've had about over 317,000 federal workers leaving the government, either fired or resigned or simply left. And I talked to many of the folks who are still there, and morale is low, and their jobs are even harder. The bureaucracy is even worse than it was before. And don't forget that DOGE cut at least 12,000 contracts, and so all the contractors we lost as well, and all that expertise has also impacted our country. And these are really, really important folks with expertise. We've lost 106,000 years of experience, of federal workforce experience, from PhD employees alone, and it's been a massive brain drain for our entire country. And our region here in Virginia has been impacted. My district alone, over 24,000 people have lost their jobs just in the federal civil service. And these are folks that care deeply about their work. I talked to many of them personally, and they were more worried about what was going to happen to their mandate, to their work, to their project, than even to their own lives. But certainly this has had an impact on their families, and I certainly share their concern about the work that's being lost and the expertise that's being lost. And so we're here today because in the end, this whole thing was about saving money, right? But one estimate found that DOGE has actually cost taxpayers $135 billion. It's $135 billion. So not only did we not save money by losing all this talent and expertise, we've actually cost taxpayers even more money. And we still have more bureaucracy. And take the Department of Homeland Security. We're having a conversation about their budget. The secretary has to sign off on every single contract herself. And we know she's doing a lot of self-dealing. And so I could go on and on about the impact it's had. We're going to hear a lot about it today, but I want to thank my colleagues for being here and fighting with us as we continue to make this a top priority for our Congress and to make sure that every single American is well served by a federal workforce. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative. And now I'd like to turn it over to Representative Walkinshaw.
Thank you, and I want to thank you, Ranking Member Garcia and Congressman Subramanian, for bringing us together today right here in Fairfax County. I want to thank the incredible team here in the county, Chairman McKay, County Executive Hill, and all of the staff who have put a lot of work into making this event a success today. Right here in Virginia's 11th District, more than 50,000 residents work and serve the federal government and the American people, and many of you here today are among them. Over the past year, you have been on the front lines of Donald Trump and Russell Vought's intentional Project 2025 efforts to traumatize the federal workforce. These attacks, characterized by rifts, the stripping of collective bargaining rights, and their efforts to turn a proud, nonpartisan civil service into a political patronage system, are having a massive and detrimental effect on not just federal employees, but on the American people. This administration has hollowed out the cybersecurity agency through rifts and politically driven reassignments, weakened NOAA by indiscriminately firing staff critical to public safety, and undermined our national security by dismantling USAID, creating a vacuum that our adversaries are filling and exploiting today. Add to this the fact that the American people are now finding it much harder to get help with their Social Security claims, and veterans are facing higher barriers to getting the timely, quality care that we as a nation owe to them. To make it all worse, Trump illegally attempted to use the shutdown in October to fire thousands, 4,000 federal workers. We pushed back. We called out the fact that shutdown rifts are a violation of the law, and working with our partners, some of whom are here today, we won. And all of these attacks are why, on my first day in office last September, I introduced legislation to prevent the president, any president, from making major unilateral changes to the federal workforce, downsizing or eliminating agencies, offices, or departments without congressional approval. But the attacks are continuing. Just last week, OPM issued a new rule attempting to codify, schedule PC, formerly known as Schedule F, which would further strip employees of their workplace protections and is designed to turn that proud nonpartisan civil service into a political patronage system staffed by hacks and cronies. It's another attempt to politicize the civil service and evade accountability. We have to stop it. We have to develop a plan for rebuilding our proud federal workforce, the foundation that makes our government function and deliver services to the American people. That's why I'm proud last week to have co-founded the Federal Workforce Caucus along with Congressman Hoyer and Senator Van Hollen, and I'm proud to say all of my colleagues here today are founding members of that caucus. Together we will shape a plan to strengthen the merit-based civil service, restore trust in our government, ensure we can recruit, retain, and support the public servants that our country depends on. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. As we begin, I also want to thank again the federal workers that are here. Of course, to Smitty Connolly. I just also want to note that all of us here are students of Jerry, of course, and in fact, Jerry is very much a part of and led this community. I think maybe sat right here, leading this very board. And so we always honor Jerry Connolly's service, obviously not just to this county and this state, but to the country and this committee. And so I want to just thank you again for being here. And as we begin, I'm going to introduce our panelists who are incredibly impressive and important to our work. So I want to introduce them, and then we're going to give them all a chance to give an opening statement. These are policy experts and really oversight professionals within the work of the federal workforce. First, we have Rob Shriver, who is the Managing Director of Civil Service and Good Government Initiatives at Democracy Forward. Before that, he served as the Acting Director of the Office of Personnel Management during the Biden-Harris administration. So thank you, Rob, for being here. Then we have Krista Boyd. Krista is the General Counsel and Vice President of Strategy at American Oversight. Previously, she served as Inspector General for the Office of Personnel Management from 22 to January of 25. Thank you, Krista. Next is Faith Williams, who is the Director of the Effective and Accountable Government Program at the Project on Government Oversight. And then we have Doreen Greenwald, who is the President of the National Treasury Employees Union. Thank you, of course, for being here. And of course, finally, the Honorable Barbara Comstock, who's a former, of course, member of the U.S. House of Representatives, who represented the 10th Congressional District of Virginia and who has been an incredible voice in just showing, I think, the country at this moment what true bipartisanship and working together actually looks like. And so thank you, Representative, for being here. And with that, Mr. Shriver, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Ranking Member Garcia, all of the members here today. It's really an honor to be amongst you here in the county that I've called my home for over 20 years. It's great to be amongst those of you who are fighting not just for federal workers in your states and in your districts, but for career civil servants across the country and everybody who relies on them for the essential services that make this country go day to day. I'm the Managing Director of Civil Service Strong at Democracy Forward. Democracy Forward is a nonpartisan national legal organization that is committed to achieving a nation and a democracy that enables all people living in America to thrive. Since President Trump's inauguration, Democracy Forward has filed more than 400 legal actions and secured more than 100 positive court rulings. We've secured victories before a mix of judges appointed by presidents from both parties, including by President Trump himself. And we've led numerous landmark legal challenges to defend a merit-based civil service. Civil Service Strong, the program I lead, is a collaborative, comprehensive response to the Trump-Vance administration's dismantling of the civil service. We do this through advocacy, storytelling, organizing, resources, data, and policy. Our coalition unites stakeholders across pro-democracy, labor, legal, policy, good government spaces. We coordinate efforts to protect civil servants, strengthen public institutions, and advance a vision of government that works for all people in our country. Together, we are building a durable, aligned movement to meet today's threats and shape a better future for public service. We know the Trump-Vance administration has taken a wrecking ball to our civil service and decimated the federal workforce. In so doing, it has harmed everyone in America who relies on essential government functions. Over the course of last year, more than 350,000 individuals exited the civil service program. They did this through the deferred resignation program, early retirement, reductions in force, and other separations. That is 4 million years of combined experience and institutional knowledge gone with no plan for replacing it, and at a huge cost to taxpayers. In total, these actions cost taxpayers $20.9 billion, and the deferred resignation program alone, a program that Congress never authorized, cost taxpayers almost $15 billion to pay federal workers to sit at home and not do their jobs for up to 8 months. Now that the administration has rolled out scheduled policy career, thousands of career employees risk losing crucial job protections, leaving them vulnerable to arbitrary termination, intimidation, and coercion. The Office of Personnel Management suggests that 50,000 jobs will be converted initially, with more to come depending on how broadly the president wants to use this unlawful scheme. In my time at OPM, we worked on hiring initiatives for veterans. This administration's policies, however, constitute the largest vets firing initiative of our time, with an estimated 100,000 vets losing their jobs. The work these veterans were doing was critical to people across the country. The list of the vital jobs the White House eliminated is endless, far more than I can list in my 5 minutes allotted, and the impact is being felt by millions across the nation. At Democracy Forward, we've been fighting against the destruction of the federal workforce, not only because it is being carried out in violation of the law, but because it is the people of this country who lose as a result. While many cases challenging these attacks are fought in courtrooms across the country, we know litigation is not the only answer to rebuilding a civil service that works for all. That's why we are using this crisis as a catalyst for change. Our new Democracy Works 250 initiative is all about reimagining a government that truly serves everyone in America. We are building a people-centered approach to government by listening to people about what they want from their government, learning from those whom the government has delivered for as well as failed, and redesigning the systems and building a bench of talent empowered to deliver for everyone. We are also engaging the tremendous talent that has either left or been forced out of government. To continue to serve the public, we have brought on more than 25 civil service fellows who served as top officials across multiple agencies. They are providing expertise as we rethink what an effective government looks like for the people and by the people. We are building on past successes to reimagine a new future. This is an ambitious but necessary effort because we know that even before today's federal workforce crisis, civil servants face serious challenges. They were asked to deliver 21st century outcomes using outdated systems, eroded protections, and talent pipelines that were never built for the scale, technology, or complexity of the moment. Policies governing the civil servants haven't been meaningfully updated in 50 years and don't reflect modern ways of working. This is a moment.
Thank you so much for. If you could just wrap up, please.
Yeah, I just have one. Thank you. This is a moment we can reimagine and innovate as we work to rebuild what the Trump-Vance administration has broken. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Shriver. Ms. Boyd, your opening statement, please.
Mr. Ranking Member, members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to participate today. This will be the first time that I've told my story publicly, and I appreciate the opportunity. I am here today as a former independent federal watchdog to sound the alarm. President Trump and his administration are attempting to dismantle the entire ecosystem of oversight that protects against fraud, corruption, and cronyism in the federal government. DOGE was only the beginning. Piece by piece, the administration has removed independent checks on the president's authority and attempted to silence dissent through retaliation. IGs were created by Congress to serve as independent checks within agencies. IGs serve as a trusted source of unbiased information that is not tainted with partisan politics. IGs were created by Congress to serve as experts who call it like it is. I was appointed as the Inspector General of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management by President Joe Biden and unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate in April of 2022. I served for nearly 3 years when I was abruptly removed from my position by President Trump last January, along with 16 of my colleagues. As IG, I provided independent oversight, working to safeguard OPM's programs and operations from fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. I led a cross-functional workforce that protected whistleblowers, held wrongdoers accountable, and identified ways for OPM to save money. In fiscal year 2024 alone, the OPM OIG identified over $300 million in potential savings for OPM. When I was removed from my position, Congress was provided no notice of my removal or the removal of my colleagues, nor rationale for those decisions. This was a blatant violation of the most recent reforms to the Inspector General Act, which were enacted with bipartisan support. The provision on removal of an IG requires that before removing an IG, the president must provide a, quote, substantive rationale, including detailed and case-specific reasons 30 days ahead of time. My colleagues and I were removed as IGs when independent oversight was arguably needed the most, as DOGE was being embedded in our agencies. OPM was one of DOGE's primary targets. OPM employees described being sidelined while DOGE personnel demanded access to sensitive data related to federal employees. DOGE used OPM resources to send threatening emails to federal employees and announce efforts to reduce the workforce. While the administration has claimed DOGE saved billions of dollars, there is little evidence to back up those claims. IGs were the first pillar of oversight attacked by the administration, but more followed. President Trump removed the independent head of the Office of Special Counsel, the agency that investigates whistleblower retaliation. In September, SIGI's funding was cut off by the White House, leaving individual OIGs without functioning websites, making whistleblower hotlines unavailable, and leaving OIGs unable to schedule training, such as mandatory training for law enforcement officers. There has been a chilling and demoralizing effect on the workforce. Many OIGs continue to do good work conducting oversight of their agencies. There is a notable absence, however, of reports, management alerts, or other communications from IGs covering the legality or impacts of the administration's actions outside of the typical work of OIGs. It is remarkable to me because given the significant turmoil the administration's policies have invoked, I would expect IGs to be playing a larger role in evaluating relevant agency actions. There are notable exceptions. For example, the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General issued a report that found Secretary Hegseth put troops' lives in danger and that he violated federal record-keeping laws when he discussed plans for upcoming strikes in Yemen on an unsecured Signal group chat. Other examples have led to swift retaliation by the administration, such as the removals of the IGs for USAID, the Export-Import Bank, and the Federal Housing Finance Agency. As we look forward to what comes next, I want to emphasize the importance of congressional oversight. It is imperative that Congress hold the administration, no matter who is in office, to account when it does not follow the law. And I'd like to close with a message to my former colleagues in the OIG community. I urge you to stay steadfast in your mission. You are called to hold your agencies accountable and to speak up. It may be easier to simply keep your head down, but now is a time when America needs you more than ever. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member and members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that testimony. And now I'd like to hear from Ms. Williams. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Ranking Member Garcia, Representative Subramanian, Representative Walkinshaw, other members, thank you for inviting me today to speak about the damage done to federal workers, public services, and everyday Americans since January 2025. My name is Faith Williams, and I'm the Director of the Effective and Accountable Government Program at the Project on Government Oversight. Sorry, I need to be closer. A nonpartisan independent watchdog that investigates, exposes, and champions reforms on systemic corruption, abuse of power, and waste. For more than 40 years, POGO has strived to ensure that our government serves everyone, not just the wealthy and well-connected. When President Donald Trump took office a little more than a year ago, he came in with sweeping promises to alter the landscape of government and an unusual body to help do it. DOGE, an entity that acted as an agency when it was handy to assume authority, and acted as a White House office when it was handy to avoid accountability, This effort, led by billionaire Elon Musk, took a chainsaw to government. By disregarding norms, regulations, and laws, DOGE wreaked havoc while failing miserably in its stated aim to save $2 trillion. In addition to establishing DOGE, Trump signed a flurry of executive orders targeting the federal workforce. The administration has also attacked or undermined oversight bodies, whistleblowers, and watchdogs, including but not limited to inspectors general, the Office of Special Counsel, the Merit Systems Protection Board, the Office of Government Ethics, internal Department of Homeland Security watchdogs, and the Government Accountability Office, making it more difficult to investigate the impacts of these changes, shield the employees who remain, and protect the public from abuses of power. The result is generational damage to our merit-based civil service, a failure of government services, a flourishing culture of corruption and abuse of power, and a people whose faith in their government is nearing all-time lows. In Trump's first year in office, an estimated 317,000 federal employees have left or been forced out of government, a reduction the Cato Institute called the largest peacetime workforce cut on record. These cuts were neither thoughtful nor precise. Rather, they reflect the administration's attacks on diversity, foreign aid, civil rights, consumer protection, and other programs, departments, agencies, and people deemed woke. They have impacted senior Black officials and Black women in particular. Just last week, the administration released its final rule to reclassify a portion of career civil servants as at-will employees. POGO anticipates that stripping employment protections from federal employees will make it easier to fire tens of thousands of workers and replace them with partisan loyalists. From last January to March, the wait time for a call back from Social Security peaked at an average of 2.5 hours. In August, the Inspector General at Veterans Affairs reported severe occupational staffing shortages at VA facilities, a 50% increase from the prior fiscal year. Staffing cuts at the IRS prompted 2 tax watchdogs to warn the agency may struggle to maintain service levels this tax season. Many stories of impact are anecdotal for now. It will take years for a full accounting of the effect of this past year's cuts. The administration's blitz on oversight bodies and whistleblowers has been accompanied by a pattern of corruption. A DOGE staffer signed a secret agreement to share sensitive Social Security data with an unidentified political advocacy group. An official from the Executive Office of the President oversees ethics at the White House. The border czar was allegedly recorded accepting $50,000 from FBI agents, posing as business executives seeking government contracts, which he denies, while the Department of Justice division devoted to combating public corruption has been gutted. Contracts are awarded to the president's supporters. The revolving door is spinning at full speed. The president and his family have grown immeasurably richer over the last year, announcing new business ventures around the world and jumping into the crypto market while the president is promoting its use and deregulation. According to the Pew Research Center, in December, just 17% of Americans said they trust the government to do what is right just about always or most of the time, one of the lowest levels in nearly 70 years. Distrust is sadly not a new phenomenon, but this administration's efforts to remodel the federal government have directly impacted people across the country and around the world. Immigrants, communities of color, women, LGBTQ people, and those relying on the social safety net have been especially harmed. Though there is an incredible amount of work to be done, much of this damage can be repaired. POGO has several solutions Congress can implement to restore the merit-based civil service, strengthen whistleblower protections, protect inspectors general and other watchdogs, combat corruption and abuse of power, and strengthen congressional oversight. I'm happy to share more detailed proposals to address each of these solutions with you during and after this hearing. There is an arrogance and a brutality in this administration's approach toward our government and the people it serves. And there is a certain sly grin and winking nod that seems to imply that while many are losing out, a select few are more powerful and profitable than ever. This harms all of us. Meaningful change will require Congress to be a powerful, engaged, representative body committed to rigorous oversight and ethical governance. POGO is ready to work with each of you, with any member of Congress regardless of party, to repair what we can and create what we need to build a government that we, the people, deserve.
Thank you very much for the testimony. Next up is Ms. Greenwald. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you. Ranking Member Garcia, members of the committee, and local representatives, thank you for holding this important hearing. My name is Doreen Greenwald. I am the National President of NTEU, the National Treasury Employees Union. While I am a proud union president, most importantly, I am a federal employee. I spent 35 years at the IRS, the last 19 as a revenue officer, helping ensure that our tax system works fairly for all Americans. I loved being a public servant, knowing that my work made a difference in people's lives. That's why I chose federal service, and it's why the over 150,000 federal employees I represent across 38 agencies chose it too. Federal employees show up every day, not for the pay, which lags over 20% behind the private sector, but because they believe in serving their country and their communities. And yet this administration has subjected these dedicated public servants to relentless, baseless attacks. Let me be clear about what the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, has done at the behest of the White House. DOGE was run by individuals with zero federal workforce experience who treated our government like a tech startup that they could just disrupt without consequences. They never consulted with federal employees or their unions. Instead, they launched a campaign of chaos and destruction. Their focus was not on making agencies run more efficiently. It was about slashing and destroying without any goal of improving services or saving money for the American people. In just 1 year, a reported 317,000 federal workers have been forced out of government service. The deferred resignation program coerced thousands to quit or risk being fired later. And it's not just federal workers who are suffering, it's every American who depends on their government. The IRS and Customs and Border Protection, where we represent employees, together bring in well over 90% of the federal government's revenue. Think about that. These NTEU-represented employees fund nearly everything our government does, and yet this administration continuously works to undermine their mission. At the IRS, we've lost 27% of the workforce. Customer service representatives are down 22% just as the tax season begins. At the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, this administration has tried to force out the majority of the workforce. They have abandoned settlements that would have returned $19 billion to defrauded consumers and reversed decisions on capping credit card and bank overdraft fees that would have saved consumers billions. At CBP's Office of Field Operations, officers are being pulled from understaffed ports of entry and reassigned to unrelated missions, compromising both border security and economic growth. And then there's the retirement processing crisis. Nearly 50,000 retirement applications are backlogged at OPM, 4 times the normal level. Federal retirees are stuck in limbo as agencies slow walk their retirements, and once those make it to OPM, they are waiting 6 to 9 months for their first annuity payment. Because of these failures, some are facing foreclosure or have lost their homes. Some have even lost their health care benefits. This is unacceptable. So what do we do to fix this? First, we need to restore collective bargaining rights for the hundreds of thousands of federal workers who the administration has illegally attempted to strip of their rights. I want to thank the members here today, as well as the rest of those members in the House who voted to pass the Protecting America's Workforce Act. Now we need the Senate to act, pass the bill, and fully restore collective bargaining rights. Second, we must undo the damages caused by DOGE, halt any additional RIFs, surge resources to OPM to clear the retirement backlog, and provide adequate funding so federal workers have the resources to do their jobs. Third, we need long-term reforms to protect the civil service, prevent the conversion to Schedule PC permanently, and strengthen due process protections. Fourth, it's vital that federal employees are fairly compensated for the important work they do. I want to take a moment today to say thank you to Representative Walkinshaw, along with Senator Schatz, for reintroducing the FAIR Act. This bill would provide a much-needed average 4.1% pay raise in 2027. If the federal government is to compete for talent and rebuild the workforce, we need to offer competitive pay. But here's what I want to leave you with. Despite everything this administration has thrown at them, federal employees keep showing up. They keep serving. They keep believing that government can and should work for the American people. Federal employees do not deserve how this administration has told baseless lies about them. In spite of the attacks, they continue to deliver for the American people despite all the challenges they face. They care deeply about serving their communities and making people's lives better. We have amazing people in this country who dream of being able to change the world and help others. We need those people in the civil service. The federal government should be the place where talented Americans can dedicate their careers to serving their country, not a place they avoid out of fear of being abused and discarded. We can fix this. We can rebuild and strengthen the civil service. We can make federal service attractive to keep the best and the brightest workers today and for the next generation of public servants. We can restore Americans' faith in their government, but it's going to take all of us, Congress, federal employees, unions, and the American people, standing together and demanding better. I believe we can do it, and I look forward to working with all of you to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And of course, Representative Comstock, your opening comments.
Okay. Okay, I'll move over. Great. Thank you, Ranking Member and members of the committee, and it's great to be with some of my former Virginia colleagues. I think in current, I think I represented areas that all of you represent now and may in the future. Will in the future. And I really appreciate the work you are doing on behalf of our federal employees and our civil service community. And as a Republican, even though I want to make clear that I've never voted for Donald Trump or his team and have worked against them vehemently, I do want to associate myself with all of the remarks that you all have made in introducing today, and I want to associate myself with all of the remarks that have preceded me here today in agreement, say that as a Republican. And since I don't think I'm probably right in this, but I don't think any Republicans have apologized to you what has happened over the past year. I'd just like to take the opportunity, even though I'm a former, to apologize to you as a Republican for what has happened, which has been so egregious. The trauma, unfortunately, the only promise that has been kept by this administration from day one is the trauma that they have put on federal workers, and that is something that has been egregious, and I've been happy to be able to work with many of the people here over the past year in trying to mitigate as much as possible, and I appreciate the report and all the work that you have been doing here. I know it has been heartbreaking for me to see the attacks on the honorable and dedicated service of so many thousands of people that have been my neighbors for decades, the people I was honored to serve and from whom I learned so much, and to see them to be attacked, to lose their careers, and for us as a country to lose their service. But I also think, and I hope, and I think certainly from what everyone has talked about here, as the caucus that is being set up, you know, we have to consider how, for the people who have been driven out, how are we going to make them whole in the future? Because that person who has lost their job hasn't just lost their job now, they have lost that ability to, work in that career, and they've lost their retirement, they've lost that ability maybe to do the things they were doing, and so when we are able to maybe get them back in that position, how do we make that whole? I hope that is something that we'll be able to look at. Now, I not only did serve as a member of Congress, I was able to serve on this great committee as chief counsel and do that oversight, and I also did serve as a senior Justice Department Department official in the Bush administration and post 9/11, I did see firsthand the value of the many civil servants at the DOJ, FBI, and the National Security Committee. So it has been particularly sickening for me to see what this administration has done in politicizing the Justice Department and the FBI and the National Security Committee in particular, the gutting, as was mentioned, of the Civil Rights Division. I think there's only 2 people now left at the Public Integrity Office, of course, what a surprise, and the IGs, as was mentioned, how those have been gutting. So it's not only a brain drain, but an ethics drain that is constantly driving out both legal and professional talent so that there is not that respect of the rule of law and honoring the oaths that we all take as public servants. Yesterday, we certainly saw that in action with Pam Bondi's deplorable performance that was one of the most unprofessional, obnoxious that I have ever seen in my decades in Washington. Of course, it was for an audience of one. She was called out by the president of the Florida Bar Association. But I think of the career staff watching that who had to realize their boss is unhinged and corrupt. And that same thought perhaps has to go through the minds of those whose careers are now under the whims of the likes of a Kash Patel, a Pete Hegseth, Kristi Noem, Tulsi Gabbard, or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who have also been dismantling their agencies and also under little or no congressional oversight. They see and hear their bosses make a mockery of their professional and decades of work and professionalism and make public statements that they know are false. I know how demoralizing this is because I have heard from so many people who I used to represent how upsetting this is, and many of them have felt they've had to leave. And if it's any comfort, it's not just the career people they attack and demoralize, they are even attacking their own political appointees. Because, for example, you saw here in Virginia, you had 2 U.S. political appointees who had to leave within months of being nominated, our U.S. attorneys. They were conservative Republicans who had to leave their U.S. attorney positions because, unlike Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, who every day make clear that they are there to work as Trump's personal attorneys, they had to leave because they wouldn't do that kind of thing. Now, I think you all know people like Todd Gilbert, who was at one point the Speaker of the House in the Virginia House of Delegates. He left after a month because, I think the stories have been out there. I won't speak for Todd, but when you leave after a month in a political position that certainly a Republican would want to have, you know why they're leaving. So our public policy and the public good are in trauma as a result, I believe. And so you see things like what happened in Minnesota is a large, in part, example of this thinking where the adults have left the building. Even Republican conservative adults, aren't there, and that's by design, as you all have pointed out. So I commend you for the Federal Workforce Caucus and all the good work that these people here and the ones you're going to hear in the next panel can do. And second, I would really like to recommend developing a bipartisan advisory committee of professionals who I do think can help serve you and various agencies, who can assist you on oversight now and more hearings like this where you can give voice to more and more people in these agencies now and into the next Congress. And you can build that record with these shadow hearings with a bipartisan record, because there are many conservative Republicans who who will be happy to join you in identifying it wasn't like this before. And we'd be happy to share lots of names of career and appointed professionals on both sides of the aisles who are concerned. And then I would also recommend utilizing the Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy, which I'm happy to be on the board of, which has been established for about the past 10 years in memory of the Senator Carl Levin, and they provide free assistance for training congressional staff over the summer in particular. You can put your staff, and any new staff can get help there. And then finally, I think we all know that we all need to speak out more, because one of the most thuggish features of this administration from the very top is to silence critics. I mean, when you're hearing that from Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, as you heard from your former colleague who had to leave because even she was getting death threats, not only to herself, but her son, and when she told the president that, said, too bad, sorry about that. We know more and more people don't speak out. And, you know, we have to do that, and those of us former and many of my former Republican colleagues, the few that we are that do speak out, they do that because we know how difficult it is for federal employees and others to speak out. So I really appreciate that you're doing this, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today.
No, thank you so much, Representative, and thank you to of course, all of our witnesses in that important testimony. I'm going to begin our questioning. We're going to have 4 minutes per member, and we'll begin, of course, going through the oversight members per seniority, and then, of course, we want to welcome our Virginia members that are here. I'm very grateful for them, and who will also be involved in the questioning. So I will begin that, and I want to start with Ms. Greenwald. Now, you, of course, you discussed represent federal workers who were fired from the Social Security Administration. Ms. Greenwald, did Americans suffer as a result of DOGE's destruction at the Social Security Administration?
So I represent a small group at Social Security Administration that wasn't necessarily impacted by DOGE, but I represent other agencies where DOGE was, and absolutely, Americans suffered in many ways. As I talked about the CFPB not being able to get their cases handled when they had people assigned to them, longer wait times on phones, not getting appointments. Some of the taxpayer assistance centers at the IRS are closed where people aren't comfortable being online. You know, they have to drive long distances to go get that kind of assistance.
That's and I just want to add, and that's exactly right. And I wanted again to highlight those cuts, and I wanted to put this up really quick, Ms. Greenwald. According to workers, DOGE's attacks on Social Security caused, and I want to quote, complete utter chaos and sent the agency into a death spiral, which is some of what you discussed. You represent some members, but you're aware of course, of the broader impacts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I want to also note that there's 69 million Americans, 69 million that rely on Social Security. People with disabilities, people who have lost spouses, children, millions of Americans also had their data stolen, likely by DOGE. We know that this impact was directly comes from Donald Trump and his administration. And we also know that Donald Trump has pushed hundreds of thousands of federal employees out of their jobs. And we should be clear, this has made lives harder, more expensive, and less safe. It's not just an issue in Virginia or in DC or in Maryland. DOGE's impacts have happened across the country. Now, in my own district, DOGE cut millions for our local universities, cut millions for local organizations on the ground doing important work, like preventing violence in our communities. And we've seen what happens when a president shuts down all checks and balances that are supposed to keep the government in check to the American people. And I want to note, in just his first year of the second term, President Trump has pocketed himself more than $3 billion. $3 billion. It's the biggest grift of any president in modern history. This is the most corrupt president to ever serve in the United States. And his partner in crime, as it relates to DOGE, which has been, of course, Elon Musk, his net worth went up by 45% in 2025 to about $630 billion, because we all need $630 billion to live life. Now, as Elon Musk's net worth went up, so did Donald Trump and his family. Meanwhile, federal workers suffered. Meanwhile, people lost their jobs. Meanwhile, Social Security became harder to access for millions of Americans, and we know that health insurance is going to go up, utility costs are going up, the costs of rent are going up, and people are having a harder time buying homes, especially in places like my home state of California. We need to call out this grift. And the one thing I hope, and I know our witnesses understand this, that DOGE was a mechanism. The destruction, or the attempted destruction of our federal workforce was a mechanism to enrich people that were already wealthy. And we took all of your labor, all of that hard work, and then we sent it off to the richest people in this country. That is shameful, and it's a big reason why Oversight Democrats and our colleagues are here today. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our next representative, which is Representative Randall.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Garcia. I want to start with a story from my district. I represent Washington State, about as far across the country as you can get. Tyner from Paulsbo wrote to me about her husband, a civilian manager at the Army Corps of Engineers. He took the job just before their daughter was born because he believed in public service and he wanted stability and a career serving his country. Since January 2025, he and his team endured months of DOGE-driven instability, repeated threats of reduction in force, harassing communications, and no clear sense of what would happen next. During the Republican shutdown last year, he worked without pay while continuing to lead his team, and as President Trump threatened to illegally withhold back pay for federal workers. He showed up every day. He kept projects moving. He kept his employees steady. But the entire time, he worked with the fear that he and his team could be furloughed or terminated any day. Russ Vogt, the head of OMB and the architect of Project 2025, has been very clear that he is actively trying to destabilize federal workers with constant reduction in force threats. Mr. Shriver, did the administration, to your knowledge, conduct any serious workforce impact assessments before implementing DOGE-related staffing reductions?
Thank you, Congresswoman. No, not to my knowledge. The American public has never seen such analysis, and my understanding is that they managed to a headcount number. They wanted to cut as many federal jobs as they possibly could.
Thank you. That's not what the American people deserve. I want to talk about a neighbor from Port Angeles, a federal worker who moved to my district last year for what they believed was a permanent position at the Olympic National Park, funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. After years of public service, including time in the Army, they thought their family would finally have stability, finally have a permanent home. That stability only lasted 6 months. The administration withdrew the IRA funding that supported this position, leaving the role unfunded and ultimately eliminated. This didn't happen in isolation. It happened inside a workforce already weakened by DOGE-era hiring freezes and staffing reductions. The remaining staff at the park were stretched thin. Olympic spans 4,000 miles of streams, and in some areas, a single employee has been responsible for enormous geographic coverage following DOGE-era workforce reductions. Ms. Greenwald, as the president of one of the largest unions representing federal workers, could you tell us what happens to our ability to provide basic government services, whether that's keeping people or our parks safe, providing Social Security checks, or conducting food inspections, when funding is abruptly rescinded, when staff are operating under constant threats of losing their jobs, and when important labor protections, like the ability to collectively bargain, are undermined?
It damages the services that Americans depend on from their government. They want a government that works effectively and efficiently. And having a skilled workforce that is in tune with what their needs are is the basis for the federal government. Having the threats holding over people's heads, having people removed that have decades of experience, you lose the expenses that the government has already paid training people and making sure that they're at the top notch of their skills to deliver. You lose people applying for those jobs because they don't want that same outcome, and people go without services. That's what it amounts to.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's what I'm hearing every day from the 27,000 federal workers in my district, and these are just two of those stories. I also represent neighbors, civilian workers at the Department of Defense who are providing incredible national security protections by maintaining our naval fleet and our submarine fleet, and I'm scared. I'm scared for the future of our workforce, and I'm scared for the safety of our country if we do not fix what this president is doing to our workforce. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next up is Congressman Subramanian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go back to something I was saying earlier, which is DOGE was, and now this new project by Russell Vogt was never about making government more efficient or more effective, because if it was, it's been a total and colossal failure. And I feel it in my district office, so from my constituents who call in. We have some of my team here today, and the Social Security Administration lost 6,500 employees in 2025, and there's been a 24% decrease in field staff in just my district alone, and it's led to huge wait times for people to get their Social Security questions answered. You're talking about 2,000 jobs cut at the Department of Education. Now we have a massive backlog on public service loan forgiveness. And we're talking about 11,000 IRS employees fired or taking buyouts. 2/3 of the senior leadership positions went vacant. And now we're having long delays about people getting their tax refunds. I can go on and on and on. So if it was about effectiveness or efficiency, it was a complete failure. Ms. Boyd, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Ms. Williams, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Great, we got one word answer. I love that. And it wasn't about saving taxpayers money either, because as I was mentioning, DOGE and the Russell vote have cost taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars at this point and counting. And so what I think it's been about, and what it's been clearly about, as others have mentioned, is it's about loyalty to the president and getting rid of all the people who may not be loyal to the president. And I hear from my neighbors and folks in our community who work in the federal workforce about how they're continually taking loyalty tests. And there are even loyalty tests now on the applications for these jobs. And so what does it do to our agencies? Representative Comstock, what has it done to the Department of Justice, for instance, where 70% of the Civil Rights Division's attorneys left the department?
Yeah, no, they are, recently they put out, the former chief of staff for Pam Bondi put out, I think by tweet, like, hey, if you want to work at the Justice Department, these are in career positions, give me a shout. And the kind of questions they're asking in some of the offices are how do you support the president's agenda? That is not something I was in the public affairs office, but that is not something that was ever asked of career employees, nor should it be. They also got rid of the honors program that was something for lawyers coming out of law school that, top shelf lawyers to come in and start their career, that they got rid of that because it wasn't going to be their people. So they've really just and now they can't find people who want to go in there because talented lawyers, that's the good news since they're trying to prosecute people who shouldn't be prosecuted, but they aren't attracting talent because people understand that this is not justice that they're in the business of.
Yeah. And so I know, Mr. Shriver, you've been on the front lines of this fight. How are we going to turn this thing around? And what's happening right now at this point? And what can federal workers look forward to?
Well, I think the first thing is that these folks in the White House don't understand federal workers. They think they're part of some deep state conspiracy. They don't understand that 80% of federal workers live outside the DMV. They don't understand that the people that are inspecting meat or keeping water safe or air traffic controllers, they're not waking up every morning and saying, how can I thwart Donald Trump? They're waking up every morning thinking about how they can do their job for the American people. And so we need to get those stories out there. We need to help the American people understand what federal workers are really all about and the importance of what they're delivering. And so that's what we're doing through our Democracy Works 250 project. We need to engage everybody to reimagine a government that works even better than what we had before, because this thing that's happening right now, it's not going to allow us to just go back to the status quo. We got to think bigger and bolder about what comes next.
Thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Representative. Next up, we have Representative Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. Congresswoman Comstock, thank you especially. I know, as you said, there are many conservative Republicans who share your views on these issues, but I also know that you have endured a lot of attacks and abuse because of the courageous public stand that you have taken in support of our Constitution and our federal workers. So thank you.
Not what all these people have put up with, so thank them.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, we've talked about Schedule PC, Schedule Policy Career, formerly known as Schedule F, which would convert as many as 50,000 nonpartisan civil servants into at-will employees and allow the administration to replace career expertise with a revolving door of of cronies, one aspect of the rule that hasn't gotten as much attention is that those converted employees would be illegally deprived of their right to file whistleblower complaints with the independent office of the special counsel. Instead, those complaints would be evaluated within the whistleblower's own agency. So the fox would be guarding the hen house. Can you talk to us about the effect this will have on those reclassified employees who want to blow the whistle on issues like fraud and corruption, with the understanding that now that they're at-will employees, they could be fired?
Yes, I appreciate the fox guarding the hen house metaphor. Schedule policy career and other regulations that are proposed and will be finalized by OPM are attempting to do with regulation what this administration could not do legislatively, which is to completely decimate our civil service. What we end up having is a population not only that will have a harder time blowing the whistle, which hurts all of us as taxpayers, but a chilling effect across everybody who is left, because who is going to put their neck out on the line at the risk of, being fired at least, and bullied and harassed at worst, probably. But yes, you are right that the schedule policy career rule would cut out the Office of Special Counsel, and a new rule that just was proposed this week by OPM would cut the Merit Systems Protection Board out of the picture as well. And so it's really a many-pronged attack on the on whistleblowers.
Thank you. And Mr. Shriver, I have 1 minute. One of the things that keeps me up is when this era ends, and it will, how do we convince the talented people who have been pushed out of the government to come back, or new talented people to come into the government, given what has taken place and the implied agreement that if you come to serve your nation as a federal worker, you have stability and protections under the law in your job? What needs to happen to create a framework so those people can be convinced to come back and serve our nation?
Yeah, there needs to be a big effort to rebuild trust. There's so much damage that has been done. There were scores of young people that were hired into their very first jobs at the end of college, coming into the government, excited about those, and they were all summarily terminated as probationary employees without any regard at all to the way that they were performing in the job. Federal workers, as Doreen mentioned, are underpaid compared to the private sector. They come to the job because they want to make a difference, and they want to be judged based on their merit and not based on their politics. That's been ingrained in our system since the 1880s, and this administration is now taking us back. So we need to rebuild that trust, rebuild these guardrails, and make sure that the American people understand that the people who work in the federal government are working for them.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. Next up, we have Representative Beyer.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for allowing me to wave on.
Of course. And no offense to my other colleagues, but you are my favorite member from the Virginia delegation. As you know this very well.
Well, I'm thrilled that the downgrade from Ways and Means to be on Oversight is very exciting. First of all, I really want to thank Congresswoman Comstock for being here. I enjoyed serving with you, but I really respect your courage, your very strong voice. You are a gift to the American people right now. And Barbara, I wish that so many of our mutual Republican friends would look to your example. So thanks for being out there. And I'd like to ask you specifically about your bipartisan advisory committee of professionals. How do you imagine that working and supporting the rebuilding we must have to do?
I think, for an informal group that you all could organize by, topic, by agency, where you could gather people together that you can, brainstorm with them to use their expertise, because certainly we have a large pool of retired people in this area, but also still active, who have watched all of this, and whether they're still working or not, but who want to and help in a lot of ways, and who are already engaged. I belong to a group called the Rule of Law Society, who's been very engaged in a lot of these issues, and they're lawyers who have been White House counsel. They've worked at the Justice Department. They've worked in a lot of different agencies, and I think a lot of the lawyers have been engaged on signing on to a lot of these amicus briefs. But then there's also a lot of people with specialties, in Homeland Security. You have people who were in the first Trump administration who are some of your best advocates against what's going on now.
Thank you very much.
And the defense, we didn't even go into defense or National Institutes of Health, which is just a horror show what they've done there.
Thank you. Mr. Shriver, you've obviously been in significant leadership positions. I've long thought that maybe the most important part of leadership is building a culture of mutual support and inspiration where you're happy to go to work in the morning. How do we rebuild the culture? How bad has it gotten?
I think, Congressman, when you have 335,000 people, quote, voluntarily leaving government jobs that they work so hard to get, I think that tells you where morale is. OPM wouldn't administer the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey this year because they know what those results would be. I hear from federal workers all the time who are distressed, and they're distressed not only about their personal situations, but about the people who depend on them. That is inevitably where those conversations go. If I'm not here, who's going to do these jobs? And so we need to have these projects like we have at Democracy Forward, this Democracy Works 250, where we're taking a step back, we're engaging broad stakeholder groups to say, okay, how can we recover from this? How can we make sure that the government that we are building to in the future is one that better serves all people and has the trust of the American public?
Yeah, thank you very much. Ms. Williams, if you could help me with my math, though. DOGE, Elon said he was going to save us $2 trillion. I was reading a CNN story this afternoon that says they finally decided he actually saved $9 billion. I think that's, but then also read in I think Ms. Greenwald's testimony that they suspended $19 billion of restitution or payments, suspended payments to CFPB consumers. Isn't that $19 billion maybe double what DOGE saved?
It might well be, yes.
or let me do the math again. Isn't $9 billion like 4% of $2 trillion? It's
really,
4.5%.
Really put me on the spot here, but yes. I will say that out of all of the government's spending in FY25, the amount saved by DOGE is about 0.5%.
Wow, great. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. Next up is Congressman Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to the panel. My name is Glenn Ivey. I represent a part of Maryland that is Prince George's County. So I'm a neighbor. Also grew up in Prince William County, went to Garfield High School. So it's good to be back, especially before the traffic gets super bad. But the point I want to make, I think, right now is a couple. One is, in my district, we had a lot of people who struggled, just like is happening here. People who are career employees who are doing outstanding work, getting great reviews year after year, who found their calling in the federal government and then were forced out based on lies primarily over and over again. And there were people like, for example, we had a job fair. A woman came with a PhD. She'd been working at NIH. She'd been conducting clinical trials on Alzheimer's, and they shut it down. And as she told me there at the time, I know you can't help me find a job because there aren't a lot of those types of jobs at these kinds of job fairs, but what really hurt me the most was not that I lost my career, not that I lost my revenue stream, but that we were doing such great things with this clinical trial, and I thought we were making real headway. And when you try and start it back up, it's not like flipping a light switch. You can't just start where you left off. And I had others who left as well. I came out of the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., so it's particularly heartbreaking to see what's going on there. And Ms. Comstock, I appreciate your comments on that front as well. But, prosecutors being forced out who are refusing to pursue cases that there's insufficient evidence to do it, that would be unethical to pursue, frankly. And you mentioned the 2 U.S. attorneys who were forced out here in the Eastern District of Virginia, the Comey case, the Letitia James case, and the like. And that's been repeated over and over again as well. And we just saw their effort to try and attack or prosecute members, our colleagues actually, who are veterans, made comments about not following illegal orders. You wouldn't think that's controversial, but they tried to prosecute him. So this is going on. There's a lot of it. We need to make sure we do everything we can to try and turn it around, because the impact on the rule of law has been, I think, devastating so far. So what I wanted to do was, I was going to ask you, Ms. Boyd, how do we get through this? And part of what I'm asking there is, I'm sort of a Watergate baby. I remember Barbara Jordan, one of my inspirations to get into public service, and her commitment, as she said, to her belief in the Constitution was whole and complete. And the IGs who came out of that Watergate era were a big piece of that, as was the Office of Public Integrity at the Department of Justice and others. Here's the concern I've got, though. If you just put it in place like it was before, or leave it like it is, it's clear that someone like Donald Trump, who doesn't care about the law, doesn't care about ethics, doesn't care about norms or traditions, will just run roughshod over it. What kinds of things can we do to strengthen up those kinds of safeguards that protect us from a president who's going to take a $400 million plane, or multi-billion dollars in payments in crypto, or $2 million to let the SEC civil fraud suit go away?
One of the key things I would point to is congressional oversight. If there isn't oversight of the laws that are in place, then it doesn't matter what reforms are added. So that's one of the key things I would point to, and this forum is exactly the kind of tool that you can utilize. I know there's the report that the committee put out today. Like, there are tools at your disposal, and I would urge creative thought on how to use those tools to be getting out what's happening, and to hold the administration accountable. But also on top of that, there are laws that are like the Freedom of Information Act, the nonpartisan organization where I am now, American Oversight, utilizes FOIA requests to try to get out to the American people what's going on. We need to strengthen FOIA so that we can have the tools to find out, uncover the historical record, and be able to see how do we move forward from there. But I would also point to accountability. There's got to be accountability for what's happened. And so whether that's coming through the IGs that are at agencies, or whether there is some sort of, new IG or commission, or, something to take a look, that there should be accountability for the actions that have happened. If this is allowed to stand without accountability for those individuals who have illegally accessed information of, federal employees and Americans, if that kind of behavior is allowed to stand without accountability, then it's it will belittle additional reforms that are put in place.
Well, I want to thank you for that. I see I've run over, but I do want to thank Democracy Forward for the great work that they've done. Ms. Comstock, your point about people who've come out of the Department of Justice, Justice Connections, doing great work. So I want to thank them and support them. And many of you are doing great work as well. Keep up the great work, and thank you so much for putting on this hearing.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Representative Vindman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Garcia, for allowing me to join this hearing, and to my fellow Virginians and my colleagues near and far. So, chaos, cruelty, and corruption are the hallmarks of this administration. I might add a fourth one, which is costs, increasing costs on the American people. And we here in Virginia feel that in the fact that Virginia is home to tens of thousands of federal workers, contractors, service members who serve this country with dedication. As a representative of tens of thousands of federal workers and contractors, and as the husband of a former federal employee who left her job last year as a result of DOGE, I know how essential they are to our nation's safety, stability, and success. They are the backbone of our government. These federal employees are deeply experienced, deeply knowledgeable, and deeply committed to our country, but some call them the deep state. They keep our agencies running, support our communities, and ensure that essential services reach the American people. They do this under difficult and uncertain circumstances and deserve our respect, stability, and a voice in the policies that shape their work and their future. Now, we've seen directives from this White House and DOGE that weaken our federal workforce. This administration has turned our government shallow. Dedicated public servants with decades of deep institutional knowledge have been purged or forced to leave under Trump administration policies. We cannot allow policies that undermine national security and drive away talent to persist. That's why I will continue to push for solutions that protect your rights, strengthen your stability, and ensure the federal government remains a viable career path for deeply knowledgeable and experienced professionals and preserves our national security and ability to serve the American people. Now, we've heard really shocking testimony today. And my first question, Mr. Shriver, I was proud to introduce Support My Military Families Act as my first bill in Congress, actually within the first 2 weeks. And I think we spoke about it actually about a year ago, close to this time. I introduced it with a group of Virginia Republicans to make sure that military spouses who are federal employees could still work from home if needed. And 2 weeks later, based on that pressure, the administration issued an exemption. So we know that they respond to pressure. How can members of Congress and the public maximize public and political pressure on the administration to support federal employees and restore critical programs?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for that legislation, Congressman. So first of all, we have to keep fighting every day, like so many of us here are. We have to keep up the pressure through the litigation. I mentioned in my opening that Democracy Forward has obtained more than 100 positive rulings from all manner of judges. So we have to keep up that pressure, and we have to keep fighting. We also have to be telling these stories. I continue to believe that most Americans don't quite connect what federal workers do to their everyday lives, and wow, is there a connection? And so the more that we can show that the harms that are happening to American people are because of what the administration has done to the federal workforce, that's going to help build pressure to reinstate these folks that need to be reinstated. I'm very concerned, for example, about our ability to respond to wildland fires. It's an issue I worked on a lot at OPM because the profession needed to be updated. Our fire prevention activities are down 38% this year because of cuts to the wildland firefighting force. There's story after story of that we need to make sure the American people understand.
Thank you. I'm going to try to squeeze one more in. Ms. Boyd, how should inspectors general across the federal government be responding to unlawful, wasteful, and abusive activities with their respective agencies? What obstacles might these IGs be facing today?
So offices of Inspector General should continue to carry out their mission and hold their agencies accountable, but that will require cooperation from the administration getting access to information. There are provisions in place that not only allow but require IGs to report in some cases when they're not getting cooperation, and that would go to this committee and other appropriate committees. And that's important for IGs to be calling it out when they're not getting cooperation. But there's got to be a response, right? And there has to be a response from Congress to be able to speak up and say, you need to be cooperating with the IG, because the IG's got to depend on that access to be able to uncover the waste, fraud, abuse, and the mismanagement that's going on.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to thank our panel. This concludes our first panel, and we will be going into a short, just 5-minute recess. So we'll be back to hear from our second panel, who will provide testimony to the committee. So again, to all of you here, thank you very much for your testimony. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Hearing. So we're going to start here in just a few seconds. If I can have all of our guests grab a seat. Thank you. I want to, I was just talking to some of our folks in the back, and for those that are here, we were just noticing that we've had, not only have we had a great first part of our hearing, we've had actually, on our platforms that we're streaming, we've had 2,000 people streaming the hearing today, and a lot of them are actually federal workers that are watching and listening, which I really appreciate that as well. And that number, of course, will grow once the stream is on YouTube and other platforms. So I want to thank our team that put that together. And I want to, of course, that call us to order. We're going to hear, this is just direct testimony for the record from current and former federal workers who were terminated by or unjustly retaliated by the Trump administration. And as a reminder, these witnesses will provide their testimony. They're not taking questions. It's just an opportunity for us to record that testimony. And to each of our witnesses, we admire your courage to speak publicly about the ways in which you were personally and professionally harmed by the administration and how attacks on the federal workforce and your employing agencies have cost the American people as well. To all public servants in the audience, and particularly those that are either on their break or they're watching this from home, thank you to those thousands of federal workers that are joining us online. Your commitment to public service is commendable, and we just thank you so much. To, of course, Representative Subramanian, Representative Walkinshaw in particular, I want to thank you both again for your work, and I'm going to have them each introduce actually our panelists that are here as we begin this piece of the hearing. And so with that, we'll introduce our panelists.
Great. First, I want to introduce Paul Acade. Paul is a federal worker who joined HUD in 2021, where he serves as a trial attorney with the Office of Fair Housing Enforcing, the Fair Housing Act. And Paul's career has focused on civil rights and consumer protection work. He's also a steward of his union local, AFG 476, and an organizer with the Federal Unionist Network. And Paul is a whistleblower and has faced removal from his position since September in retaliation for lawful whistleblowing. And despite assurances of whistleblowing protection, Paul was terminated this week. And so thank you, Paul, though, for standing up and for your voice. And welcome.
I think you introduce all of them.
Next is Kelly Jabar. Kelly Jabar is one of my constituents, and she started her career in government as a contractor at the U.S. Embassy in Qatar. In 2023, Kelly joined the civil service as an employee of the Food and Drug Administration, and she was serving as a program specialist last year when she was fired despite her excellent performance reviews during the mass firing of probationary employees. Kelly fought hard to be reinstated and was able to return to work, only for her and her entire department to be riffed again. And Kelly and her coworkers were strung along for months before finally being terminated in July. So thank you, Kelly, for all your work and all your service to our country. We appreciate you being here today. Next is Abby McGillth. Abby joined FEMA as an emergency management specialist in 2024, helping disaster survivors access funds to repair their homes and replace their belongings. Abby was alarmed by the administration's attacks on FEMA, cutting contracts and staff, censoring research, and denying people assistance. So she joined nearly 200 current and former FEMA employees to sign a dissent letter in August and blow this whistle on these charges. And Abby was placed on administrative leave the very next day, where she remained for 5 months. Thank you, Abby, for everything you did and for being here today.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I want to thank 3 of my constituents who are courageously participating in the panel today. First, Mr. Jeff Conklin, who is a longtime federal employee and Marine Corps veteran and graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He's the Chief Security Officer at CISA. However, after the acting director of CISA failed a polygraph test that the acting director himself requested, DHS placed Mr. Conklin and 5 other career employees on administrative leave. Second, Mr. Kenneth Bledsoe was a Foreign Service Officer at the U.S. Agency for International Development. He was living in Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo when Elon Musk, DOGE, and the Trump administration began to dismantle the agency. He fled violence in the DRC with his wife and 2 children after being stationed there. Soon after returning home, he was fired by the Trump administration. Third, Mr. Jacob Cross was a management and program analyst at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Jacob was a probationary employee who had recently made the decision to pursue a career in public service, but he was fired as part of mass RIF actions at NOAA before his nascent federal career could get off the ground. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you. And with that, I want to, of course, begin. We are going to have each of our witnesses give 4-minute testimony, and so I'll just call as we move forward through the list. And with that, I'm going to start with Mr. Acade, and you are now recognized for the purpose of offering your remarks.
Thank you to Ranking Member Garcia, to the members of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and to every member here for holding this important forum. My name is Paul Acade. I'm a union steward with AFGE 476 and an organizer with the Federal Unionist Network. I am also a whistleblower. I'm appearing before the Spotlight Forum in my personal and union capacities. I'm not representing HUD or any other government agency. I'm here to talk about my experiences and the experiences of federal workers in general under DOGE and Trump. To put it simply, we faced a daily attack on our ability to serve the public. We fought attempts to undermine the rule of law in big and small ways, and we've endured a psychological attack meant to break us. Federal workers have faced cruelty, retaliation, mass firings, discrimination, and union busting. And yet, so many of us remain, and we have refused to be broken. We have refused to be silenced in the face of unlawful actions. Instead, we have spoken up in our offices, in Congress, in the courts, in the public square, everywhere. We are still here fighting every single day for the American people and for democracy because we took an oath to do so. My story is similar to countless stories across the government. Until earlier this week, I was an attorney in the Office of Fair Housing at HUD. As a federal employee and citizen, it was my obligation and right to speak up about the wrongdoing that we were witnessing. And so I lawfully brought my concerns to the Congress as a federal whistleblower. Yet I was suspended and then ultimately fired for doing so. The notice of my termination arrived just 2 days ago, but we cannot be silenced. Too much is at stake. HUD is legally required to ensure equal access to housing by taking on landlords, banks, developers, governments, anyone that denies someone the American dream. DOGE and political appointees decided that we weren't allowed to do that work from day one of this administration. They said that fair housing was not a priority of this administration and that it was an optics problem to have a fully staffed civil rights office. They illegally withdrew discrimination cases, shredded settlements, and blocked investigations that they didn't like. They stopped us from making sure that federal funds are distributed fairly and without discrimination. They reassigned most of us to defend the agency instead of your rights. And all of that means that right now, in each of your districts, survivors of domestic violence, people of color, disabled veterans, and American families are not being protected by the government that their tax dollars pay for. 4 of us at HUD collectively blew the whistle, and 2 of us, Palmer Heenan and I, were fired for telling you that truth. Yet their retaliation has not shut us up. It's just handed us a megaphone and proven our point. Lawlessness has touched every aspect of our working conditions. Right now, in the name of efficiency, this administration is attempting to illegally move HUD headquarters out of DC and to Alexandria, kicking another agency out of their building without congressional authorization or funding, uprooting the lives of employees, and blatantly ignoring our union. This is not about efficiency, it's about control and destruction. They know that if they can move a cabinet-level headquarters without congressional oversight, and despite clear laws that say that they can't, civil servants will flee because they know the law and our rights won't be respected. And in the face of all of this, dedicated civil servants want to keep serving the public. We want to see accountability, justice, and a better federal government that serves all people. And to get there, we need a few key things. First, we need immediate support and oversight. We need every single member of Congress to support Protect America's Workforce Act to restore union rights. Unions.
Thank you so much, sir. Just want to try to keep us on time. But thank you very much. Next up, we have is Ms. Jabar.
Thank you for hearing my story. I really appreciate the opportunity for myself and representing my coworkers who have also suffered under this administration. My name is Kelly Jabar. In December 2023, after many years of education, getting my master's in public administration and employment as a contractor, I became a civil servant. I have a passion for supporting the teams that I work with and working within the challenges of the restricted budget and security concerns that government comes with. Working for the FDA was a dream come true. Even before joining the agency, I read all about its history, about Dr. Wiley, the Poison Squad, and the fight to make our food and drugs safe. I was incredibly proud to work there and contribute in a small way to the health of the American people. I absolutely love creating procedures and systems to create operational efficiencies. I am an absolute nerd. In August 2024, my world changed. I was diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer. I had to have multiple surgeries, but I was more worried about my career. I was more worried about the job and the people that I support. I was so dedicated that after my first surgery, I went back to work 2 weeks early. In January, I had a second, more serious surgery. A week after I got out of ICU, I received a letter from HHS saying that I had been terminated for not meeting probationary standards. This absolutely devastated me. My performance had been exceptional. I had numerous awards. I had just received a promotion, and they didn't even have correct information on the letter that they sent me or the correct performance score. With my supervisor's assistance, I appealed immediately, and eventually the termination was rescinded. Again, I pushed myself to go to work, back to work early. I was exhausted and in pain, but I still made the commute for over an hour away. I valued my job and hoped I would be okay. I was completely wrong. During the weeks I returned to work, we had to deal with DOGE in the office. Just going down to get lunch, we were questioned on where we were going, what we were doing, often by people who were dressed in t-shirts and jeans. People were so fearful, they stayed in their offices and locked their doors. I know I did. Then on April 1st, barely a month after my initial termination was rescinded, my entire team, including me again, was riffed. Just so you're all aware, my department was the department that handled the government property, accounting, and offboarding. All the administrative tasks that were necessary for anyone leaving the agency. When we got the notice, it was a very short response sent to our government email with no additional information. I believe access to the FDA was revoked at 7 o'clock, including email access. Since the email was sent to our official email, many people didn't get that notification and were left outside the FDA doors. I worked so hard. I fought cancer. I had done everything I could to keep serving the American people. And I was discarded again. And for what? Not because of performance, not because of budget, but because of politics. Because of the whims of this administration and a man who has no medical background, spouts misinformation, and has an axe to grind with the FDA. For months, there were questions of if we would return to work or not. The back and forth was incredibly stressful. It was made worse because I ended up going through 2 more surgeries. After all this, on July 14th, HHS sent out a short 2-sentence long letter saying we were officially let go. This went again to our work email address. There was no additional information such as where to send the equipment or how long our insurance would last, which, as you can imagine, was kind of important to me. It took over a month to hunt down any information that was useful, and the only way I found anything out was because of my friends that were willing to get information for me. I had so many questions and a great supervisor who, even though she was let go with me, continued to help me get the information I needed. The department head, who was surprisingly promoted after we were all riffed, refused to speak with any of us. Later, somebody told me a notification went out that the supervisors and department heads were not to speak with any of the rift people. We had tons of questions with nobody to help us. A month or so after this, I received my SF-50, which includes extremely sensitive information. In another hit from HHS and FDA, the envelope was not sealed and easily accessible by anyone. Additionally, others received the wrong SF-50s, so now I'm worried somebody else has my information. I sent an email that day to my previous boss and never received a response. After a month ago, HHS finally mailed a letter providing identity protection services. Of course, any damage was already done. My dream job has turned into a nightmare. I just wanted to heal, and this just keeps giving me more and more stress. Just recently, I was able to obtain a job. However, so many people with more experience and ability than I are still out of work. That supervisor that called to check on me every day when I was going through surgery, when I had any questions about being fired, she was fired too, and she has 2 kids and a mortgage.
Thank you so much. If we could just conclude. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I actually, it's hard to actually to limit the time. I'm so sorry. And I know I did it to our first panelists as well. I just want to make sure that we're keeping on time. But thank you so much. And we have all the testimony we're going to receive, by the way, for the record. So thank you. Did you want to conclude with a final sentence?
I just want to say this is all breaking my heart, and I appreciate you all being here and listening to us.
Yeah, just thank you. Just to go back, Mr. Acade, if this is something you want to conclude with as well, I know I also limited your time, I'm trying to keep it on time. If you wanted to make a final kind of conclusion as well, I'd be happy to take that right now.
The most important thing is that everyone who's following illegal orders, who is giving illegal orders, need to know that oversight will come for them, accountability will come for them. That's the only way that we stop this from happening again.
Thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Conklin, now recognized for your statement. Let me turn the mic on for, if we could restart that. Thank you.
Go. Good afternoon, Ranking Member Garcia and members of the committee. My name is Jeffrey Conklin, and I am currently the Chief Security Officer of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I have accepted this request to testify today in my personal capacity, not as a representative of DHS or CISA. I have 46 years of government service, including service in the Navy, Marine Corps, state government, and 26 years as a federal employee. I have been a member of the Senior Executive Service since 2006. My prior roles include Chief Information Officer and Chief Security Officer at USCIS, Deputy Commander of the U.S. Coast Guard Cyber Command, and since 2018, I have served as a chair of the DHS Clearance Revocations Appeals Board. In June 2025, I received a directed reassignment transferring me from USCIS to serve as CISA's Chief Security Officer. I reported to CISA on 1 July 2025. I had pre-scheduled annual leave that month for an international vacation to begin on January 18th. I worked a total of 9 days at CISA before leaving on that trip. During that short period, the acting director of CISA, Dr. Madhu Gadamakala, told me he needed access to a highly sensitive interagency program, a controlled access program, managed by another organization. I was told that the external organization required a counterintelligence scope polygraph as a prerequisite for accessing the information in this program. Dr. Gadamakala directed me to coordinate the process. Shortly thereafter, I received a polygraph request from the acting director bearing his digital signature, and based on the acting director's position and the purpose of the request, I signed the attestation at the bottom of the form confirming his bona fide need for a counterintelligence scope polygraph in order to access a controlled access program. I departed on annual leave on July 18th and returned to CISA on August 4th. When I returned, my counterintelligence staff reported to me that the acting director's polygraph examination had produced what is called a significant response, and that notifications were being handled through DHS counterintelligence channels. I did not examine the polygraphs, I did not score the polygraph, I did not receive the underlying results. That same day, reviewing the email that had built up on my trip to England, I found a notice stating that my security clearance had been suspended. The stated rationale was an allegation that I may have participated in providing false information to the acting director about whether a polygraph was required prior to assessing certain programs. Shortly after that, my system access was suspended, my PIV card was disabled, and I was told to wait in my office. I was then escorted out of the building and placed on administrative leave pending investigation, initially for 10 days, then 30 days, and then indefinitely. Since then, I have received no meaningful update other than a directive in 2025 to turn in all of my government, or in December of 2025, to turn in all of my government equipment to a DHS investigative point of contact. I complied with this. I am here today for 3 reasons. First, to defend myself. The allegation against me is inconsistent with the basic documentary record. The acting director signed and initiated his own request, and my attestation was a routine step in a standard security process. Second, because I have been kept off duty for months with little transparency. Last fall, I inquired to ensure I could complete my regular performance evaluation. I received no reply, and as a result, I could not complete my evaluations, so I received no merit award in 2025 and no salary adjustments for 2026. Third reason I am here is because I am concerned that the action taken against me and my staff have a chilling effect on national security and counter professionals across the government. People are expected to dispassionately carry out routine security processes with integrity and without fear of reprisal. I appreciate the committee's investigation and the invitation to testify today. I respectfully ask the committee to investigate this matter and to determine who authorized this investigation and why a routine security attestation has led to my clearance suspension and prolonged removal from duty. Thank you for your time. I am prepared to answer questions and provide additional details.
Thank you, sir. That's something we're definitely going to follow up on, and so we're definitely taking note on that, so I appreciate that. Mr. Bledsoe.
Good afternoon, Ranking Member Garcia, committee members, and other representatives who are here today. Thank you for taking an interest in good government and for affording those of us here the dignity of being heard. I know your time's limited, and regrettably you can't hear from every one of the hundreds of thousands of civil servants who have been deprived of their livelihoods without the due process that the Constitution promises them. Every one of them is a human being with a story, and not every story is dramatic enough to grab the attention of a public whose capacity to focus is under constant assault, but they still matter. I struggled for a long time with how to talk to you about my story, because it's not just one story and it's not just mine. I could make it about me. I could talk about my dramatic evacuation from the Congo just over a year ago, explosions and gunfire, leaving under cover of night, going days without sleep, only a carry-on bag for each of us, crowded onto tiny boats with our fellow diplomats, their babies, their pets, off to restart a life from scratch in the Northern Virginia winter. The funding for this evacuation, for saving our lives, required a waiver request be processed up to the head of the agency. It was not completed until we were already out of the country. I could focus on how I and my wife and my 2 children, along with every other USAID family in Kinshasa, put our lives at risk in service of the United States of America, only to be publicly insulted, humiliated, and treated like criminals by the wealthiest and most powerful people on the face of the earth. I could mention how months of expenses piled up for USAID evacuees going unpaid because those who would never dare set foot in a place like Kinshasa were too busy nullifying the Constitution in order to end our careers as fast as possible. I've spoken about some of these things before. I was the Marcus Doe who put in testimony in one of the early lawsuits about the administration's abuse and abandonment of those of us who had the temerity to join USAID to try to make the world a little bit less cruel. I gave an interview on ABC News in March of last year where I hoped to break the dam of fear-induced silence. For my trouble, I was investigated by the administration, though an investigation, as a number of my co-panelists can testify, implies a desire to gather new information and arrive at a result that is not already a foregone conclusion. Alternatively, I could focus on the work that USAID was doing in the DRC that now goes undone. I could talk about how Americans worked alongside our Congolese colleagues to make life better for the people of Central Africa. We tried to prevent starvation, stop domestic abuse, help build safe, reliable water systems. Just like fired federal employees, the Congolese are human beings and their lives matter too. No matter how many billionaires sneer and snicker about the senseless suffering that they've inflicted on the world's most vulnerable people, their lives still matter. But USAID wasn't just charity, so I could talk about how we made life better for Americans, how we worked with our colleagues from the CDC to track obscure diseases that regularly crop up in remote communities of the Congo, helping quickly identify and control the pathogens that spread fast enough to remind us where the term going viral originated. I could explain how we built reliable allies and trading partners for things we can't produce, like rare earth minerals. I could discuss how we fought poaching and preserved the incredible biodiversity that should be the inheritance that the whole world holds for future generations. I could talk about how we ensured the children of these places were educated on what used to be American ideals of democracy and human rights, so that future generations around the world would understand why alliance with the United States was in everyone's interest. I don't have the time or the words, or really even the knowledge to convey all of these connected stories at the same time. I can't fully convey how it feels to have been caught with my family in the nexus of two crises happening on opposite sides of the Atlantic, or the pain of having to tell my children everything was going to be okay, when I had no idea if that was true, and when I was terrified myself. I cannot express to you the agony of spending years planning for the life of a foreign service family only to have that future yanked away, my retirement plans reduced to ashes, to be forced back to the drawing board of my life plan in my 40s, and to be mocked for my trouble. I imagine it's still nowhere near as awful as having to endure the entirely preventable death of a child from a disease whose treatment never arrived because the people who were supposed to deliver it were fired, without any plan from those doing the firing to manage that ensuing chaos. Thank you again for your time. I'd be honored to talk to any of you another time when I can offer you more details about all of these stories. And I hope you listen to as many human stories as you can from my brothers and sisters at USAID in Kinshasa, in Washington and around the world, from my fellow public servants that did important life-saving work at other agencies, and from everyone else being robbed of their lives and livelihoods by reckless and inhumane decisions. We are all human beings, and we all deserve the dignity of being treated that way. Thank you.
Thank you. And is it Ms. McElraith?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, members of the committee, for inviting me here. I'd like to be clear that I'm speaking today in my personal capacity as other members of this panel and not on behalf of the agency. I joined FEMA as an emergency management specialist back in 2024, and like the representative said, my role is primarily as a caseworker on FEMA's Individuals and Households program. That means my job is to send direct cash assistance to disaster survivors across the United States to fix their homes, replace personal property, rent a place to stay, or meet a variety of other post-disaster needs. Before that, I was an EMT. I'm here today because over the last year at FEMA, this administration has dismantled entire programs, canceled contracts, cut staff, censored research, delayed and denied assistance dollars, and failed the American public. In my job, I spent every day working with disaster survivors on their applications for FEMA assistance. I have seen firsthand the pain and trauma that families go through and how delays and red tape make it even harder on the worst day of their lives. One example of this red tape is Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem's insistence on personally approving every FEMA expense over $100,000. Because of her policy, the FEMA Helpline call center contract was halted back in July. The FEMA Helpline is like a 911 for disaster assistance. Just like 911, it's critical to have someone on the other end to answer when disaster survivors need help, and that's what those contractors did. This contract lapsed just as the deadly 4th of July flash flooding devastated parts of central Texas. Suddenly, my office had to handle all calls to the FEMA helpline in-house. Without the contractors to assist, disaster survivors who'd lost everything were waiting all day to talk to someone, or the phone didn't get answered at all. I was reassigned from doing casework to answer these back-to-back phone calls, and I remember sitting hopelessly at my desk, watching the call queues climb. Each number on my screen was a person or family waiting for help that I couldn't give them. But this is just one appalling example. Following the Texas floods, I decided to sign the Katrina Declaration, which blew the whistle on dangerous cuts like these to FEMA. Over 190 current and former FEMA employees signed the declaration, and it was published and sent to Congress on August 25th, 2025. All 14 of the public signers still at the agency, including myself, were placed on administrative leave the very next day. Federal workers have the right to speak on issues of concern, just like every other American. This was a protected disclosure under the Whistleblower Protection Act of 1989 and, of course, the First Amendment. Despite this, we were subsequently placed under retaliatory investigation. I filed a whistleblower complaint with the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, who eventually intervened and obtained a stay from FEMA. I was told I was being reinstated around Thanksgiving, and I went back to work on Monday, December 1st. On my first day back, walking into the office, I was thrilled to see my coworkers again and finally get back to work after what was then 3 months of admin leave. The news broke that morning that we'd been reinstated, but a few hours later, a DHS spokesperson went on record and said that our reinstatements were unauthorized. They characterized us as, quote, entrenched bureaucrats resisting change, unquote. At a little after 4 p.m., I received an email telling me that I was once again on admin leave. I could hardly believe it. Saying goodbye to my coworkers again felt like a punch in the stomach. I'm still on admin leave today. Myself and the other signers have been given no indication on how long this will last or if we will be fired. Removing us from duty for now 5 months has created gaps in our work and slowed down disaster recovery. FEMA depends on experienced civil servants, including engineers, planners, and emergency managers, to carry out its mission. What we want is to simply do our jobs. Our obligation as federal employees is to the Constitution and the American public. FEMA was my dream agency to work for since I was in college. Like my colleagues on this panel, I knew I wanted to help people, and I was drawn to public service. I wanted a job I could be proud of. I wanted to spend my career at this agency. Now I am sad. I fear I will never be able to get a job in the government ever again, and part of me is not sure I want to. I mourn not only for the disaster survivors who have been left behind, but for the immeasurable loss of knowledge, research, and the field of emergency management more broadly. My colleagues are the smartest, most talented, dedicated, and mission-driven people I have ever met, and I have been immensely proud to work alongside them. But right now, we are in danger, and we need Congress's help. Starting January 1st, DHS began terminating a subset of FEMA employees called CORES. This was paused during the winter storm recently. It's a bad look to be firing FEMA employees during a natural disaster, but it's likely beginning again. CORES are the rapidly deployable backbone of FEMA's response to disasters. I am one of those core employees, and the work that I do every day goes directly to disaster survivors in this country.
Thank you so much.
But not anymore.
If you can just conclude, that'd be great.
I have three or so asks for Congress today. First, support the FEMA Act of 2025 to elevate FEMA to a cabinet-level agency. Second, DHS runs out of funding tomorrow. We need protections for core employees in the CR for DHS. And lastly, we need aggressive oversight using the Katrina Declaration. Thank you so much. Please fix this before it's too late.
No, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And Mr. Cross.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'll try to keep my comments quick. About 15 months ago, I achieved the same goal as many of the people in this room and became a federal employee. Prior to that, I had spent nearly a decade of my career in the private sector. My primary focus has always been around HR technology, process improvement, and data analytics, skills that many people across all branches of the government have remarked is sorely needed. I started my role in December as a management and program analyst and worked hard at my mission. In January, I was approached with an opportunity. My program office was in need of senior leadership, and my director had asked if I would be willing to take on the role of acting executive officer in order to expand the impact of my mission and potentially even across all of my branch. The vision was simple. I would take on the role of acting executive officer and we would bring in a chief of staff and chief scientist to work alongside me. Instead, the hiring freeze was put in place when the new administration began. Because we were still sorely understaffed, I was asked if I would also take on the duties of the chief of staff so that I could assist in fulfilling more obligations for our agency. To be clear, I'd been working for the agency for a little more than a month, and at this point I was performing 3 duties, including 2 that were considered senior leadership. The next month became one of the most stressful and exhausting of my professional career. We lost staff, navigated executive orders, and had crisis meetings on a near daily basis. One particularly noteworthy anecdote was when we lost a scientist with PhDs in oceanography, computer science, and meteorology. Our director asked his boss what the plan was to replace this individual. His boss responded, "There are about 6 people in the world with his skill set. We don't." While all this was going on, I tried to keep my head down and focus on my responsibilities. I had just finished a 3-year project plan to completely transform our processes and systems in a way that we felt would allow the entire program office to be more accountable and transparent. 3 days after that, I was fired as part of the DOGE probationary employee purge. My firing came in the form of an email at 3:30 p.m. informing me I was fired because my knowledge, skills, and abilities did not fit with the agency's needs. I walked over to my deputy director to say goodbye, and she was shocked. No one had told her or anyone else that I was fired. After that, my program office went into survival mode. There wasn't staffing or time to implement improvements because everyone's energy was needed just to keep the mission going. Now I'll switch gears to talk about the personal impact the firing had on me. Getting this job was a huge boom for my family. We have 1 child, and we're planning on having another. My wife is self-employed, so this job's stability, benefits, and parental leave were essential to our plan. We found out she was pregnant 2 weeks before I was fired. I found out later my vision and dental care for my family was terminated the week after we were fired. Our health insurance was cut off a month later. What was supposed to be an exciting time for our family became a nightmare as we navigated the loss of income, benefits, and tried to prepare for the arrival of our daughter. I was lucky enough to get a job as a contractor for a nonprofit in June, but was forced to take a nearly $40,000 pay cut to do it. We found a way to make ends meet and welcomed a healthy baby girl in October. But what was supposed to be an exciting and comfortable expansion of our family instead became a stressful time that required us to take on debt to manage. And I think that's why I felt compelled to speak here today, to explain that while something may seem okay on the surface, the reality can be much different. My family navigated our hardships, and we are so lucky to have our daughter with us now. But because of the indiscriminate and cruel treatment we received as part of the DOGE firings, we took on debt, and my wife was forced to go back to work sooner than would be ideal. My former program office is the same way. The dedicated civil servants that are still working there are ensuring the mission stays on track. But the innovations and growth that were necessary to make sure we stay on track for the future has been put on hold. Just like with my family, the impacts of the government cuts won't all be felt today. And I fear that is exactly what the administration is counting on. They will point to the fact that the mission is still getting done and say, these people weren't needed anyway. But in 1, 3, maybe 5 years from now, these impacts will start to show. We will fall behind the rest of the world. We won't be able to fulfill our missions, and we won't be able to provide the standard of success that the public relies on. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. And I just want to thank all of you for just incredibly powerful testimony. It's important for us to have officially on the record, but for us to obviously hear directly as well. And we definitely will be following up with some specific cases that we heard here today. And as we conclude, I just want to say that I want to thank the members that were here today, those who participated, but most importantly, I want to thank the federal workers that your service to our country and your community is so important. And I just want to remind us that oversight is so critical at this moment. That's our job here as a committee, and it's a job of Congress to ensure that we are holding folks accountable so that these abuses don't happen again and that we work to restore so much of what we've lost. And then finally, learn from this period of time so that as we build back and we grow, we do it in a way that supports our federal workers and your families in the best way possible. So again, thank you all for being here. We appreciate your time, and thanks for participating today. And finally, again, thanks to Congressman Walkinshaw for hosting us in his former chamber and in the community. So thanks again, everyone.